Hi and welcome to Genetics Decoded. I'm your host, Sharon Palmer. Please note that the information presented here today is not for medical advice. It really is to inform and better educate you so that you can make better choices. If you enjoy the podcast, please remember to go in and like and subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything and it supports what we're trying to do. Today, we're going to have a look at longevity. Who wants to live a longer and healthier life? That's me. In fact, that's really me. I see people every day at a clinic level where their health is really impacting on their quality of life. I can also see that you can make a really, really big difference. What we're going to do today is I'm going to cover the top 10 things that I believe you should focus on to improve your longevity and the quality of your life. None of them are impossible to do, but some of them may quite surprise you. So stay with us today as we look at health and longevity. One of the main reasons why I wanted to do this podcast, and we do it like week in and week out, is I want people to make better decisions around their diet, their lifestyle, their supplements, so that they can end up with better health outcomes. I have been in practice for over 25 years, and for 13 of those years, I've been specialising in clinical genetics. Every single day, I see firsthand the fallout in people's lives around poor health and disease. And it can be devastating for some people. And for a lot of people, it ends up in the loss of their life. But I have also seen the remarkable capacity of the body to heal. And I think people need to become a lot more proactive in their own health and well-being, not handing that off to a third party, whether it's your GP or your naturopath, but working in collaboration with these healthcare professionals. But if you are better educated as an individual, you will ask better questions. You'll be able to kind of sort through, what you think is good for you and what is not so good for you. And I know that your genetics can give you insight into your health that nothing else can. But I also see people making really weird and wonderful decisions around their health. Things that I think at the end of the day are just really obscure and, I think, how is that going to help? But on some level, people think, the more extreme it is, the better it must be, or somehow it makes them feel that they're doing something significant. But I know that it's consistency. It's sometimes very simple decisions made day in and day out that have the biggest impact on our health. And I know that genetics can give you much, much better insight. And I often have a lot of patients asking me, what do you do? Or what do you think is really important here? So what we're going to look today at is the key areas that I think are really important around longevity. And not just living a long time. We don't want to be living for a really long time if we are unwell. And we can see from the research that our lifespan has been steadily increasing over the decades, but we also know that many people will spend the last 20 to 30 years in really poor health, and that's not a good outcome. You don't want to be alive longer to just simply suffer. So stay with me today as we go in and look at some of what I think are the really important areas to focus in on around longevity. And what I'm also going to do is, this is our 20th podcast today. My producer's going, yay, because he's told me that hardly anyone gets to 20. So we've hit a milestone. And what I want to do today is kind of go back, like all of the different podcasts that we've done up until now. I haven't just kind of plucked them out of the air and gone, oh God, what are we going to do today? They've been chosen for a particular reason. And what I want to do today is look to see, as we look at these key areas around longevity and well-being, is how these different parts of your genetics, these different episodes tie into that and how you can get some real insight by using your genetic data. What is aging? Is it simply a number on a page? I think we go, well, if you're 85, I'd call you old. If you're 15, we'd say that you're young. But aging really is more than just a number. That is called your chronological age. And we do know that your chronological age does not always reflect your biological age. If you're making some really, really good decisions around your health and well-being, your biological age could be much, much younger than your chronological age. And that's really what we're all hoping to achieve here. But the opposite can be true. You could be 40 from a chronological point of view, but if you've been drinking and smoking and not exercising and you're overweight, does that sound like anyone who's listening? Your biological age could be 20 or 30 years older. So we need to kind of realize that there's two, and what we really want to focus on is bringing down our biological age, and so that as we do age from a chronological point of view, we can stay in good shape. I was on LinkedIn this morning and I saw, I think her name was Betty Bloom, but I could be wrong. She's 99 years of age and she has just broken 3 world records in swimming. And it was great. The little video clip showed her standing she was on the starting blocks and she dives in and she's doing her backstroke and her freestyle. She smashed all these world records and she didn't even start to swim until she was in her mid-60s. So don't think, oh, I'm too old to even begin the process. Age is not a barrier here. And in fact, if you are getting older, it is really important to be proactive because so much around how we age is within our control. If we all want to live longer and we want to live healthier, are there things called longevity genes? Because I know you're going, just tell me what they are and I'm just going to do what they say and I'm just going to live forever. And certainly the research shows that there are some longevity genes. We're quite early in the piece here around genetics and longevity. But what we do clearly know is there's not a single gene for longevity. We are seeing that there's multiple genes that in and of themselves have modest impact, but combined together can have quite significant impact on longevity when looked at as a group. And I went through the research and I thought, well, what are these genes? And I was actually quite interested to find out what they were because I've done a lot of genetics, like what's my genetic presentation here? And so we're going to start by going in and looking at what are the longevity genes that show up repeatedly in the literature. There are 6 of these longevity genes that we're going to cover today. So number 1 is what we call the ApoE4 allele. Now, you might think, oh, I've heard something about ApoE. ApoE4 particularly, is the really significant risk factor around developing Alzheimer's and dementia. We know, like everybody listening, will have either no E4 allele, or you might have a single allele, or unfortunately, you might have a double allele. And I remember not long ago, Chris Hemsworth had announced that he found out he had the E4 allele. We know that this E4 allele is not associated with longevity. In fact, the opposite. So we know that it's not good to have this ApoE4 allele. And again, your genetics allows you to go in and have a look at it. And it's not about, oh, I've got it and it's all gloom and doom. We understand the pathways by which this particular protein is working. It is the ApoE is our major cholesterol carrier within the brain. And again, we're so focused on cholesterol being the bad guy. We also know that the ApoE protein is playing a really important role around glucose metabolism and glucose regulation. If you find out that this protein is not working in your favor, again, there are things that you can do to go in and moderate it. So the E4, the ApoE4, is a risk factor. It doesn't support longevity. But the ApoE2 allele is associated with longevity. So when we look at the ApoE, we will either have a 2, a 3, or a 4. I've gone in and looked at my genetics. I have what's called an E3, which is kind of neutral. Doesn't put me at increased risk, doesn't offer me any real protection, but the ApoE2 allele is associated with longevity. And again, looking at this need to really support our cognitive health, support the way that the brain functions. The next gene, gene number 2, is called the FOXO3, FOXO3 gene. And in fact, there's a number of variances that play a role here. And I went in, I could find these RS numbers in my own genetics, and what I found is I've got some protection here, so I was quite pleased about that. But what this particular gene does in the body, it really helps your body to, like, from a cellular point of view, to better react to stresses in the environment and maintain what we call homeostasis. And this is the one thing we really see with aging is, again, forget about the number, is that your body needs to retain the ability to maintain this balance, to maintain this homeostasis. So if it's challenged in any way, it's got this ability to come back to its baseline and continue its function. And we see that as we begin to age, we lose this ability to maintain homeostasis. This FOXO3 gene is playing a big role in being able to control that cellular homeostasis. This gene is also playing a really big role in controlling insulin and insulin growth factor. And again, what are we in the midst of right now is, a diabetic epidemic, metabolic syndrome in which we've become insulin resistant. You need to get those things under control. They are really impacting your health in really significant ways. The next gene is gene number 3, and it is called GPR7. I tried to find it in my genetics, but I couldn't, so I don't know what my presentation is here. But again, it's playing a role in how the body is reacting to these extracellular signals, playing a role in how it's reacting to hormones and to neurotransmitters. So neurotransmitters are what are very active within the brain. So again, we're starting to see a little bit of a pattern here. Number 4 is called the ACE gene, and it plays a really big role in controlling our blood pressure. It plays a role in controlling our insulin response and plays a role in maintaining muscle and muscle strength. And I went in and looked at my genetics here. Big plus for me around ACE. I'm thinking I'm doing pretty good. But I look at my family too. Like, I've got both my parents are 85, so that's a good thing. My grandmother died when she was 93, and good old Uncle Bert lived to 100. So I'm hoping I've got some of those genes in me. Then we're looking at gene number 5, and this is called the Klotho, Klotho, the Klotho gene, playing a role in insulin signaling, around inflammation, and the control, homeostasis within the vascular system. And then the final gene, number 6, is interleukin 6, which is playing a really big role around inflammation. Also, I do pretty well here, so I was quite pleased when I looked at my genetics here. But, these are just kind of some early indications around genetics and longevity. But I think what we're seeing is this need to really support cognitive function, maintain cellular homeostasis, control insulin, control inflammation. And, so many of the things that we choose to do or not do on a day-to-day basis can have some direct impact here. But what I want to look at now is, the top 10 areas that I tend to focus in on at a clinic level to really go in and support health in a significant way. And as I think of, I'm going to tell you what my top 10 are, you might even want to pause this right now and give yourself a chance to think, what do you think your top 10 are? Just go through that. I don't want to influence you, but think about what your top 10 are. And then as we go through this list, see if they show up. And this is not me saying, oh, this is just the definitive list and it's absolutely right. But I know that this is going to play such a big role. And what's really important is that when we're looking at supporting our health and supporting our longevity, we have to be very mindful of the external factors that are within our control. So this is things like our diet and our exercise. But we have to also understand that, we've got to come right down to your cellular and DNA level. And you're going to see that my top 10 kind of go across both of these. So right down here with broad choices around our lifestyle habits. All right, let's begin with the top 10. What was on your list? Was it diet? Was it exercise? Maybe you said ice baths. You've been watching podcasts and you brought like a little bath and you go out there every day. The number one on my list, DNA replication. I bet you didn't have that on your list. And the reason for that being is that when your cell divides, there are 3 billion pieces of genetic information, 3 billion that have to be replicated. And they have to be replicated exactly. If there's an error in that replication, that new cell, its function is quite likely going to be impacted. And again, it opens up the door to issues around disease. And you think, well, I don't know, how much DNA replication am I doing every day? It has been estimated that you will be producing 330 billion new cells every day. That averages out to about 4 million per minute. There is an enormous amount of DNA replication happening day in and day out, and you want that to go really, really smoothly. If we look from a genetic point of view, like if I go, what would I focus most on if I was trying to support DNA replication? And it would be your folate metabolism pathway. A lot of you have probably been hearing about the MTHFR gene and the methylation pathway. In fact, our episode, and I've got it here, episode 5, was going in and looking at the MTHFR and folate metabolism. And folate metabolism is more than the MTHFR gene. There's a lot of really important enzymes in that system, but your folate and the folate metabolism is crucial around DNA replication. I would always go in and screen for that at a genetic point of view. If I'm trying to intervene, so you think, well, I could go in and look at my genetics around that pathway, what does that equate to? So at a clinic level, what would I be prescribing to support that? And what comes up for me is a really good activated B complex. This is not to encourage you to just run down to your local pharmacy or health food store and just buy any vitamin B over the counter, but to really go in, look at your genetics in this pathway and get a personalized compound that is going to absolutely address this folate metabolism, because if you can get it right, it can make a really big difference. So the number one for me is to support this DNA replication. Number 2, what's on your list? Mine is DNA repair. So we're still focused right down here at the level of the DNA. You want that DNA to be replicating smoothly, but to know that our DNA is constantly being damaged, and it's very important that we can go in and repair any DNA damage that happens. We know that when DNA damage happens and we can't repair it or we can't get rid of that damaged cell, that is kind of the beginning of cancer cells within the body. Your DNA is particularly vulnerable to what we call oxidative stress, the damage from free radicals. And if you look and go, well, what are the genetics that could give me some insight here? And we did an episode 10 on the antioxidant system, because it is really, when we look at this process of oxidative stress in the body, you don't want to be trying to fix this by, taking some vitamin C and some vitamin E. You want your own primary antioxidant system to be working well. And you first want to go and find out genetically where it's not working and then begin to work with supporting its function. We also know that your folate metabolism, your methylation is really important. So you can start to see why there's been such a big focus on MTHFR and this methylation pathway. At a DNA level, it's playing a really, really big role. When I'm trying to support this from a clinical point of view, I always start with genetics first, but my prescribing it comes back to a really good activated B complex developed based on your genetics. And the other thing that I'm going to use a lot around this pathway is something called sulforaphane. Now, a lot of people are starting to hear of these broccoli sprout powders in the marketplace. A broccoli sprout powder doesn't contain sulforaphane. What it does is it should be able to deliver sulforaphane into the body once you have digested it. But you need to be really, really cautious if you're buying a broccoli sprout powder out there in the marketplace. Most of them do not work. And the reason for that being is that these products don't contain sulforaphane. Sulforaphane is produced from two precursor compounds coming together, something called glucoraphanin and myrosinase. A lot of the broccoli sprout powders in the market do not contain myrosinase, so you can't produce sulforaphane. So be really, really careful when purchasing a broccoli sprout powder. It can be very difficult to know just by looking at the labels. You've got to really know what you're looking for, but you want to get it right, because if you get some of this sulforaphane being liberated into the body, sulforaphane as a compound will go in and at a genetic level will upregulate your antioxidant system. So you're trying to use a supplement at the level of gene expression, but you've got to make sure that you can achieve that gene expression. And step number 3 is gene expression. We've got to support gene expression. And everything that happens in your body happens first at the level of gene expression. You are turning your genes on and off billions of times a day. They are the things making your immune cells and driving all of your enzymes and supporting your hormone production. And you need to be able to turn these genes on and off effectively. The way you control gene expression is with something called methyl groups. And it is through your methylation pathway that you produce your methyl groups. And again, from a genetic point of view, we come back to that folate metabolism, the MTHFR, and much broader, the methylation pathway. You want those critical pathways working so that you can produce really good levels of methyl groups and you can control this gene expression, because it's what is driving your body. And again, from a genetic point of view, those are the two pathways that we need to go in and look at. And again, clinically, I would be recommending a really good activated B complex. And if you've been listening, you're thinking, wow, that activated B complex shows up a lot. And this is why, at a clinic level, it's also one of the supplements when we prescribe, when we get it right based on people's genetics, it makes a really, really big difference. I personally have taken an activated B complex probably almost around 20 or so years now, and it's something that I almost never miss. But again, any B that you just run and buy over the counter is unlikely to be doing the job. You've got to get it right. But you really want to support this gene expression. Step number 4 is support your mitochondria. Your mitochondria produce all of your energy in your cell, and your body is not going to work or function without this cellular energy. And your mitochondria are particularly vulnerable to this oxidative stress. You've got to go in and again support these primary antioxidants. So, you would go in and you would look at your genetics here. You would use something like a sulforaphane to upregulate that system. We know that your mitochondria and mitochondrial function are really important for neurological health. We see as mitochondrial function declines, we see the impact from a neurological point of view, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease. So keeping your mitochondria working, supporting your brain, because your brain is consuming an enormous amount of your cellular energy on a day-to-day basis. You drop off on your mitochondrial production of energy, and it's going to have a really big impact from a cognitive point of view. We've looked at, there's a number of episodes that would tie into this. We've looked again, here comes the MTHFR and the folate metabolism. There's the antioxidant pathway. And we just recently did a whole podcast on energy and the mitochondria. So if you haven't listened to them, go back in and listen. From an intervention point of view, what would I go in and do here? Again, the activated B complex, a broccoli sprout powder, releasing sulforaphane to deal with the oxidative stress. And I would also be going in and I would screen genetically if someone's got the capacity to convert their CoQ10 into their ubiquinol, because again, ubiquinol is playing a role. So you can see how looking at these key pathways in the body and supporting them can really have significant impact on health and well-being down the track. Step number 5, so we're halfway through. This is keeping your cell membrane healthy. So we've moved out of the level of our DNA, past the mitochondria, and now we're looking at your cell membrane. Everything that gets in and out of your cell has to go through this cell membrane. You want it to be healthy, you want it to be functioning well, you want it to be pliable. And this is where we come down to, your essential fatty acids. This is about the right types of fats. And the right types of fats are going to really support your cell membrane. This is going to be your omega-3 fatty acids, your EPA, your DHA. The types of fats that are going to not support healthy cell membrane function are your trans fats and your hydrogenated oils. So you've got to stay away from those. Start turning over and looking at your labels. Your omega-3 fatty acids, you're going to find them at the highest concentrations in your fatty fish, so things like your salmon and your mackerel, but they're also in things like our chia seeds, our flax seeds, our seaweed, our walnuts. So for you who are vegetarians and vegans, there are some alternative sources of omega-3. We haven't done, one of the podcasts that will be earmarked to come up soon will be around your essential fatty acid pathway. So we know that our response to a fish oil, the type of fish oil we may need to take in our threshold dosing, all lays within our genetics. And again, I would always look first at the genetics before prescribing a fish oil. And for people who are vegans or vegetarians, there's this option to go to an algae-based supplement. But you want this cell membrane to be really healthy. We are seeing from the research that the fatty acid profile within your cell membrane is critical for cellular function. And the more out of balance it is, the more responsive it is to positive changes within your diet. So again, making these dietary changes can have a really fundamental impact. But if we look at something like your red blood cells, they take about 120 days to turn over. So this is where, again, being consistent is that sometimes some of the interventions that you're doing, they might take 3 or 4 months to really show their benefits. And it's really interesting. I hear people, we do lots of programs at the clinic. I hear people coming in and telling me all these weird things that have gotten better. Like I had a man the other day said he hadn't been able to smell for 10 years and he's starting to get his sense of smell back. I have just finished a program with a woman and we were doing it online. And as soon as she clicked in, I looked at her and I thought, oh my God, she looks so healthy. She looks really, really well. And I said to her, how are you feeling? And she said, I'm feeling really good. And I said, you look really good. And she said, everyone's telling me like my skin looks amazing. So again, good health is reflected in lots and lots of ways, but be consistent with it. So if you've been doing these essential fatty acids for a good 3 to 4 months and suddenly those cell turnover is happening, then that cell membrane is going to be produced with all of those good essential fatty acids and it's going to be functioning a whole lot better. Number 6 is build and retain muscle mass. Was that on your list? I hope so. No? Ben, my producer, saying no. We know that your muscle to fat ratio is one of your most important biomarkers of aging. You simply cannot afford to not be active, to not be exercising regularly. We know as if we age and we're losing muscle, we see the incidence of disease increase. We did a particular episode on the ACTN3 gene and muscle fiber type. We know that some people respond really well and very quickly to weight and resistance work. Other people, it may take a lot more effort. We know that some people are really prone to this loss of muscle. We also saw when we were going into detail in the episode around energy and mitochondria that some of the physical signs of mitochondrial dysfunction, a number of them tied into muscle, loss of muscle tone, loss of muscle control, muscle weakness. Keeping your muscles strong is really, really important. We want to stay in this anabolic phase. We want to stay in this phase of building. We want to avoid this catabolic state, which is the loss, the breakdown. And it takes a lot of energy to support your muscle mass. So if you're not using it, your body's going to go, I'm just going to get rid of it because it's taking up so much of my resources and we don't need it. So if you're not exercising, get out there and start. It doesn't matter what, just begin to make those changes and focus on getting some weight and resistance work into your program and keep a good watch. Find a way to track that muscle to fat ratio. Number 7 is support your immune system. You want to age with a nice, healthy, robust immune system. You don't want it to be all over the place. You don't want it to be going down this autoimmune pathway. You want to make sure that if you've had any kind of infection, that you get in and you resolve that inflammation. You can do some very good pathology screening to look at inflammatory markers, to look at autoimmune markers, to make sure that those things are not elevated. But at a clinic level, the thing that I look at first and foremost around immunity and around risk of autoimmune disease are food intolerances, particularly gluten. If you're eating foods that you're intolerant to or allergic to, it can be through this reaction is this inflammatory signaling and this risk of producing these autoimmune markers. We're eating food day in and day out. Make sure that the food that you're eating is not triggering this inflammatory and autoimmune response. And your genetics is so good at going in and looking at this pathway. Your vitamin D pathway, so your vitamin D levels and your vitamin D pathway, critical around immunity. We did a full episode around the vitamin D pathway. It's not just taking vitamin D and thinking that it's right, but go in and get this pathway supported for you. Also, around immunity, focus on your gut microbiome. Very, very important. But again, the ability to colonize those bacteria, a lot comes back to your genetics and your secretor status. So again, by looking at the foods that you're intolerant to, looking at key pathways, getting the gut microbiome supported, all of these things begin to contribute to this nice, healthy, balanced, robust immune system. I see a lot of people who come in and they go, I just feel like I'm getting one thing after another. I just recover and then I get something else. And, a lot of people end up with this post-viral fatigue. So don't just let that slide. Get in there and really look after your immune system. It is really, really important for you as you begin to age. Number 8 is keep your brain healthy. And this ApoE4 allele, it just shows up repeatedly across all of the longevity research. So, go in and keep the brain healthy. But the thing to remember, what keeps your body healthy keeps your brain healthy. Do not think that they're two completely separate things. So all of the good choices you're making around supporting your health will be supporting your brain and your cognitive health. But when we come in and look at cognition, we know that there can be some really important genes around how the brain functions, and future episodes that we're going to do will go in and look specifically at these. But we know that controlling oxidative stress is really important for cognitive health. We know that your essential fatty acids, particularly your DHA, is really important for cognitive health. We know that your mitochondrial function, the ability to keep energy up to the brain, is also really important. So all the things that you're doing around your body will also be keeping your brain healthy. And when we look at the statistics now, we've talked about this previously, Alzheimer's is currently our number 1 killer of Australian women and our number 2 killer of Australian men. If we're going to live longer, most people go, if I lose my cognitive ability, it just doesn't interest me. You've got to keep that brain functioning. And there are so many things you can do to go in and support that. Number 9, so we're getting close to the end, is your gut microbiome. We've seen how keeping your gut microbiome healthy can impact in other parts of your body, particularly around your immune system. But we're learning so many things around the benefits of the gut microbiome. Those benefits are not just because of the species that live in there. In fact, a lot of the benefits are because of the metabolic byproducts of the gut microbiome. You want a nice, diverse gut microbiome. I was reading a research paper the other day where they've just identified some brand new novel species in the gut. We've just touched the tip of the iceberg here. Do not think that just taking a few probiotics is going to sort that out. One of the most important things you can do to support your gut microbiome, I think first of all from a genetic point of view, go in and establish your secretor status. We've done a particular episode on that, your secretor status and the gut microbiome. Your bacteria is not just floating around in the intestinal tract. It needs to attach to the intestinal lining, and your genetics determines whether you make that. I really want to know what someone's secretor status is before I begin to treat them, because it allows me to direct their diet, understand which species they may be really at risk of not supporting, and also being a lot more specific with probiotics if I need to. But the most important thing is to go back to a whole food diet. Get away from processed food. Absolutely get rid of ultra-processed food. And the statistics are alarming as to the percentage of our diet that we're using ultra-processed food, up to 60 to 70%. That is just killing and starving your gut microbiome. Start to, get rid of those processed foods out of your diet and get more into these whole foods. Also get rid of sugar out of your diet. You need a nice, diverse gut microbiome. Number 10, lucky last, it's diet. I hope that you all had diet on your list. And it seems like, so boring. I've heard that before. Yes, I know I should have a healthy diet, but how many of you really are doing well from a dietary point of view? I would encourage you to, again, move back to this whole food diet. Start to take a lot more control around your own food preparation. And yes, I know it's time consuming, but we're putting food in multiple times a day. It is the fuel of our body. And if you put in a bunch of rubbish, you're not going to be able to do what you want with it. Your body is not going to do well on these processed foods, on this sugar. Try and create where it becomes part of your family's routine, that it's not just mum stuck away in the kitchen doing the food preparation on her own. Begin to incorporate it into your lifestyle. The other day, I love to go to farmers markets. I've had a veggie garden for 30 years and I still love going out and picking things out of my veggie garden. I think it doesn't get any better than that, but I love going to farmers markets. And, the other week I had my grandson, I had my son and my father and me, and we all went off to the local farmers markets. And, we're walking around and we're picking food. And I love to shop like that, but it was also such a good day because, here's 4 generations out shopping for food. So take it away from something that is a chore to something that contributes to your family. Learn how to cook. I think it's a dying art. And we've got into the habit of using Uber Eats. We think that if we pull a piece of plastic and put it in the microwave, that's cooking. I'm sorry, it's just called reheating. And once you take control of your own food preparation, you can take control of what goes into that food as well. And I know that it is time consuming, and I know that it might be a skill that you don't have, but little bit by little bit, begin to take back control of your diet. How you age is absolutely within your control. Forget about doing all these little gimmicky things that you do for a week or two or for a month or two and then go, oh, that's too hard. Or you've heard of the new Butte thing that somebody's promoting. It's not rocket science. It's about consistency over time. I would highly recommend you get your genetic data to give you insight into where some of your weaknesses are, to enable you to personalize all of your interventions, to not feel that because you can't do something 100%, that it's not worth doing it at all. Do not make things so complicated that you don't even begin. Just little tiny steps will take you to where you want to be. So be really proactive. We all want to age healthily. We don't want to lose our mental capacity. We don't want to lose our physical capacity. But if you are not proactive, you will not get the outcomes that you're looking for. At the iDNA Health Clinic, we focus a lot around programs. We're looking around these key critical pathways. We're looking down at the level of the DNA and the mitochondria. And it doesn't have to be overwhelming. You can be very systematic in your approach. And every single day, I see the results of people making the right decisions. So if you want to be healthier, live longer, begin to take the right action. Thanks for listening to the podcast today. If we've started to increase your interest around clinical genetics and you think you would like to find out a little bit more, please feel welcome to reach out to us at iDNA Health Clinic. We're proud partners of this Genetics Decoded podcast. It's a real opportunity to get in touch with us and find out how you could go down this pathway yourself. If you liked the podcast, enjoyed it today, please go in and push all the buttons, like and subscribe. It really does make a difference and supports what we're trying to do here. We have a podcast release every Monday, so keep a watch out. All of our topics are around genetics and health, and we would love you to join us every week.